All right, we are continuing our week-long look at Greater Idaho, the movement to move the border and make Idaho bigger and make Oregon smaller. Lesser Oregon, I suppose. Now today, let's talk law and order in Eastern Oregon, specifically Grant County, where the sheriff there says that one-size-fits-all laws passed by big cities, they don't work. And the former U.S. Attorney for Oregon warns all of us it is dangerous to dismiss those who live in our rural areas. In part 4 of this series, our sister station in Portland traveled to Grant County to talk about legal changes that would come with the movement. Here's Pat Doris from KGW's The Story.
Here on the bluffs above John Day, the wind howls and it seems like you can see for 100 miles. It's gorgeous. There's no tall buildings, there's no city congestion. Everything is different. And one thing that I'm hearing from people out here is that they resent being forced to live under the same laws and rules that may work for the city, but don't work out here.
That feeling's been around for decades, but more recently gave birth to the Greater Idaho movement, which promises to do something about it. 11 rural counties so far have voted to begin serious talks about moving the Idaho border so that it would cover them, take them away from Oregon, and let them live under Idaho's more conservative values. The new border, as envisioned by the movement, would cover a total of 15 counties and look something like this. We think it's unlikely that it will ever happen, but it is evidence that many in rural communities are deeply angry and convinced Oregon will never recognize or honor their values. That's why we're here in Grant County, to talk with people who live here and listen to their frustrations. While many here are supporters of the movement, the sheriff is on the fence about whether Grant County should become part of Idaho.
If there was a vote tomorrow to make this part of Idaho, how would you vote?
I still don't know. The jury is out on that. I think I'm fairly informed on it, but I don't know if I would be part of a better thing or we'd end up right back where we are. And I think we've kind of talked about that.
Can you tease that out a little bit more? Because when we were talking about it, we weren't getting to that part on camera.
Sure. So my concern is Idaho going to change with Boise and we be right back in the same place we already are perceived to be? And will they want to get rid of us at some point? You know, it was a bad take, or are we going to want to get rid of them? I just don't know if it's going to be best for both of us.
But the sheriff is as frustrated as anyone when it comes to statewide laws passed by voters in the urban counties that impact lives here. Measure 110, for example, which decriminalized user amounts of drugs. During the 2020 vote in Grant County, the measure was voted down, with 2,811 no votes and 1,626 yes votes. However, in Multnomah County, where the measure began, it easily passed with 333,042 yes votes and 115,034 no's.
From my side of the view on 110, and I've voiced my opinion before, it's an epic failure. Measure 110 has, from my observations and who we're working with and dealing with, it has not been beneficial.
Like many in law enforcement, Sheriff McKinley is frustrated the measure is all carrot and no stick, that there are no consequences now for drug use and no incentive for users to stop.
Do you think there's more drugs in the county because of it?
Absolutely.
And more people using?
Sure. Hard to quantify, but I believe what I see out there, that's accurate. And I think on one of the outtakes of that is our mental health calls that we're getting also. Drug-induced psychosis, different drug-related issues that are affecting the mental health, and we're seeing more and more of that. And it's hard for the treatment provider to help them if they show up at the hospital and they're under the influence, because they need to be sober for them to be able to help them. And now the tool of getting them into jail on a crime for the possession and actually using that as the stepping stone to get them to get help is gone. I can't even have them here, get them sobered up. They go see a treatment provider sober, and usually they do that while they're in custody. That's ended.
And if you have people who are psychotic and maybe can't be restored, as they say, there's probably not much room in the state hospital.
No, and it ends up being a revolving door, and we're trying to find beds for people and spending hours of our time sitting with them because they're completely out of their minds, trying to get them secure till they get to a facility, and it's just a complete waste of time.
Now, you might think that ignoring the rural counties is fine, but Oregon's former U.S. attorney says it's not. It's dangerous.
That I, grew up in rural settings in Washington and Idaho, and I get it. I understand why there's this anti-federal government sentiment.
Billy Williams was the top federal law enforcement officer in the state of Oregon from 2015 until 2021. He dealt with the takeover of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge by Ammon Bundy and his anti-government followers in January of 2016. It happened right next door to Grant County. I dialed him up for a Zoom call as I wondered about the danger posed by the overwhelming feelings many have in rural Oregon that the people controlling the state in the big cities do not care about them.
With this divide, and if it continues to grow, does that create fertile breeding grounds for these anti-government groups?
It absolutely does. And look, the Bundys and their followers and other far-right extremists love these opportunities because that's where they inject themselves.
Ammon Bundy and dozens of armed occupiers took over the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge and held it for most of January as a protest against the federal government. Bundy was eventually arrested and a member of his group, Lavoy Finicum, killed on January 26th as they drove from the refuge to a meeting in Grant County. They had planned to meet with the sheriff at the time, Glenn Palmer. For Williams, the former U.S. attorney, it's a reminder that the feelings generated by the urban-rural divide could easily lead to violence.
Extremists thrive for those days of extremist engagement, right? They want those awful things to happen because they don't care about people. They only care about their own perspectives, and I could see this leading to something like that, whether it be Waco or Malheur or anything else, or more gun violence, going on. Somebody who's just an extremist or somebody who has some mental health issues and they find themselves in the possession of a gun and open fire. We don't want that. We don't need that.
Back in Grant County, the new sheriff, Todd McKinley, is also aware of the danger. But despite the lack of political clout his rural population has in the rest of Oregon, he is hopeful that things will get better.
Some of us are in this fight for the long haul, and that's why we're still here. We still have hope.
Well, if you missed any of our coverage on the Greater Idaho from Eastern Oregon, check out KTVB.com for all 6 parts. And yes, I'm looking at your comments right now, so we'll get to those here in a minute. We'll be right back.